Commander Vexthal's claws scraped against the polished floor as he entered the Grand Council chamber. The massive room stretched high above him, its walls made of crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. 12 different alien species sat in floating chairs arranged in a perfect circle. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on him with growing irritation. Vexthal had seen this look before. It was the same expression every council member wore when a field commander brought them news they did not want to hear. His scarred shell, marked by plasma burns and projectile impacts from dozens of worlds, told the story of his long service to the Empire. But today those battle wounds felt heavier than usual. "Speak quickly, Commander," said Mordak, the council leader. His thick tentacles moved restlessly as he spoke. "We have many worlds to discuss today. Your report about this Earth can surely wait." Vexthal straightened his posture and began his testimony. His voice carried the steady tone of a soldier who had seen too much. "Honorable members of the council, I have served the Empire for 37 standard years. I have conquered the crystal cities of Andromeda Prime. I have broken the will of the warrior clans of Rigel 7. I have watched entire civilizations kneel before our might." He paused, letting his words sink in. Several council members shifted in their seats. "But the humans of Earth," Vexthal continued, "they are different. They do not break. They do not kneel. They do not surrender." A sound like grinding metal came from Ambassador Queltar's breathing apparatus. The reptilian creature's vocal sacs inflated with what Vexthal recognized as mockery. "Commander, your preliminary reports describe a species that has barely left their home planet. They use chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Surely you exaggerate." Vexthal's mandibles clicked together twice, a nervous habit he had developed after the human encounters. "I wish I was exaggerating, Ambassador. Let me tell you about Li Jun." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant humming of the life support system seemed to quiet. Li Jun commanded a human unit of only 30 soldiers, Vexthal began. "My battalion surrounded their position with 1,500 troops and full air support. Standard protocol demanded that we offer terms of surrender. Through our translators we explained that resistance was futile. Their weapons were primitive. Their position was hopeless." Vexthal's voice grew quieter, forcing the council members to lean forward to hear him. Li Jun's response was to start singing. The entire unit joined him. They sang in their strange human language while they checked their weapons one final time. Then they charged straight into our plasma cannon fire, still singing. Council leader Mordak's tentacles stopped moving. "They committed suicide?" "No," Vexthal replied firmly. "They attacked. While singing their death songs, they somehow managed to destroy 3 of our heavy weapons and kill 47 of my soldiers before we finally stopped them. Not one human in that unit tried to run or hide. They fought until every single one of them was dead." The silence in the chamber stretched for long moments. Finally, Ambassador Helcor spoke. Her insectoid wings buzzed nervously as she formed words. "Perhaps this was an isolated incident. One fanatical unit does not represent an entire species." Vexthal turned to face her directly. "That is what I thought too, Ambassador. Until I met Park Hannah." He activated a small holographic projector built into his arm. A three-dimensional image appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a heavily damaged building surrounded by military vehicles. Park Hannah was 19 years old by human standards. Barely an adult. She was not a soldier, just a civilian who happened to be in the wrong place when our invasion began. When my forces advanced into her city, she barricaded herself in this building. The hologram rotated, showing blast damage and defensive positions carved into the structure's walls. She held this position alone for 72 hours. She had no military training, no advanced weapons, just determination and whatever material she could find. My battalion threw everything we had at that building. Plasma bombardment, siege charges, chemical weapons. Nothing worked. Vexthal paused the hologram on an image of a young human female, her face streaked with dirt and blood but her eyes still defiant. When we finally breached the lower levels, we discovered what she had been doing during those 3 days. She had turned the entire building into a trap. Every floor, every room, every corridor was rigged with explosives made from household chemicals. She waited until our command staff entered the building, then triggered the charges. The hologram showed the aftermath, a collapsed structure and the wreckage of several Imperial command vehicles. She killed herself to take out our officers, Vexthal continued. But here is what troubles me most. Before the building collapsed, our audio sensors picked up her final words. She was not crying or begging for mercy. She was laughing. Council leader Mordak's patience finally snapped. His tentacles lashed out, striking the crystal floor with sharp cracks. Enough of this nonsense. So what if a few humans chose to die pointlessly? Every species produces fanatics. It means nothing. You are making the same mistake I made, Vexthul said quietly. I thought they were fanatics too. But during the 6 months I spent on Earth, I encountered this same behavior from every human we met. Children, elderly civilians, trained soldiers, shopkeepers, teachers. They all fought the same way. They all refused to surrender. He deactivated the hologram and looked directly at each council member in turn. These humans have spent their entire history fighting each other. They have perfected the art of warfare through thousands of years of constant conflict. Now, for the first time in their species' existence, they are united against a common enemy. Us. Ambassador Queltar's vocal sacs deflated with what sounded like a sigh. Commander, even if everything you say is true, they are still a primitive species on a single world. The Empire commands the resources of 10,000 star systems. That is exactly what makes them so dangerous, Vexthul replied. They have nothing left to lose. Admiral Thokres stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching Earth grow larger through the thick glass windows. The planet looked peaceful from space, with its blue oceans and white clouds swirling slowly around green and brown continents. He had seen many worlds from this distance, and they all looked the same before conquest. Beautiful, quiet, and completely unaware of what was coming. His fleet of 200 warships stretched out behind him in perfect formation. Each ship was longer than most cities and carried enough firepower to level entire continents. This fleet had never failed to bring immediate surrender from any world it approached. The sight of so many weapons floating in space was usually enough to make any species give up without a fight. Communications officer, Thokres called out, his voice echoing through the bridge. Open a channel to the planet below. Use the standard surrender demand. The young officer's fingers danced across his control panel. Green lights flickered as the transmission began. Thokres had given this same speech to dozens of worlds. It was always the same. He would demand surrender, threaten destruction, and within minutes the planetary leaders would agree to imperial rule. People of Earth, Thokres began, his voice being broadcast to every radio, television, and communication device on the planet below. I am Admiral Thokres of the Galactic Empire. Your world is now surrounded by Imperial forces. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally or face total destruction. Respond immediately. He waited for the usual reply. Most planets took only a few minutes to respond with complete submission. Some took longer to argue among themselves about terms, but they always surrendered eventually. Fear was a powerful weapon, and his fleet represented more fear than most species could handle. But the response that came back was unlike anything he had heard before. This is Kim Tae speaking for the Unified Defense Command of Earth, a human voice said clearly through the communication system. We have received your demands and we reject them completely. Earth will not surrender. Thokres blinked his large eyes in confusion. No single voice should be speaking for an entire planet. Usually there were presidents, kings, or councils that needed time to debate and argue before giving up their power. Who exactly are you? Thokres asked. What authority do you have to speak for your entire world? This time a different voice answered, a female human who called herself Choi Min. Admiral, you do not understand how our species works. We do not have a single ruler who can surrender for everyone else. When Earth is threatened, we all become the defense command. Every city, every nation, every human stands together as one. The Admiral felt the first stirring of unease in his stomach. His tactical officers were studying their sensor readings with worried expressions. One of them, a young female with bright blue skin, looked up from her console with wide eyes. Sir, she said quietly, our sensors are detecting massive activity across the planet's surface. But they are not fleeing to underground shelters like other species do. Thokres moved to look over her shoulder at the readouts. What he saw made no sense. Instead of the usual pattern of panicked civilians running for safety, the sensors showed millions of humans moving toward military installations, factories, and weapon storage sites. Sir, another officer called out, energy signatures suggest they are manufacturing weapons and ammunition at an incredible rate. Every factory on the planet appears to have switched to military production. This was not how conquests were supposed to work. Civilized species surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. They did not mobilize their entire population for war. Perhaps a demonstration of our power will bring them to their senses, Thokres decided. Begin orbital bombardment of their major cities. Target government buildings and military installations. Avoid unnecessary civilian casualties for now. The order was carried out immediately. Brilliant beams of plasma energy lanced down from the Imperial fleet, striking the planet's surface with tremendous force. Major cities around the world were hit simultaneously. Government buildings vaporized, military bases were turned to glass, and huge explosions lit up the planet's surface. Thokres expected immediate surrender. No species had ever continued fighting after watching their capitals burn from space. But the humans did something that shocked every alien on the bridge. They started destroying their own planet. Sir, the tactical officer's voice was shaking now, the humans are launching missiles but not at us. They are targeting their own infrastructure. On the sensor displays, Thokres watched in horror as humans destroyed their own bridges, power plants, communication networks, and industrial facilities. Anything that the Empire might find useful was being systematically demolished by the planet's own inhabitants. They would rather destroy everything than let us have it, whispered the communications officer. Down on Earth's surface, in what remained of the city of Seoul, a human named Yoon-Soo was preparing his people for the fight of their lives. Imperial drop ships were descending through the atmosphere like deadly rain, bringing enemy soldiers to occupy the planet. Yoon-Soo had been a simple police officer just hours ago. Now he found himself leading a mixed group of soldiers, civilians, children, and elderly people who had all grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Some had military rifles, others carried hunting guns, kitchen knives, or tools from their jobs. Listen to me, Yoon-Soo called out to the group gathered around him in the rubble of what had been a shopping center. These aliens think we will run away or hide when their soldiers land. They think we are just another weak species that will give up when things get difficult. He checked his old rifle one more time, making sure it was loaded and ready. Around him, a grandmother was teaching teenage children how to make explosive devices from household chemicals, while a group of office workers practiced ambush tactics using advice from military veterans. They do not understand what they are facing, Yoon-Soo continued. We humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We have fought each other over every piece of land, every resource, every idea. We know how to fight and we know how to win. The first Imperial drop pods crashed into the city streets with thunderous impacts. Armored alien soldiers emerged, expecting to find terrified civilians begging for mercy. Instead, they found something no species in the galaxy had ever seen before. An entire planet's population armed and ready for war. Commander Vexthal walked slowly through the destroyed streets of what humans called Busan. His heavy boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. 300 days had passed since the invasion began. 300 days of fighting that should have ended in 3 days with complete human surrender. But the humans had not surrendered. They had not even slowed down. Vexthal stopped at a large hole in the ground where one of his supply convoys had been destroyed just that morning. The explosion had been so powerful that it left a crater 20 feet deep. Pieces of Imperial vehicles were scattered everywhere, mixed with the bodies of his soldiers. Sir, his aide called out, approaching carefully through the rubble. The young officer's shell showed fresh scars from recent battles. The daily casualty report is ready. Vexthal took the electronic tablet and studied the numbers. Each day brought worse news. Today alone they had lost 200 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles, and an entire communications outpost. The humans seemed to strike everywhere at once, then disappear like smoke. How many ground forces do we have left? Vexthal asked, though he already knew the answer would be depressing. 40% of our original invasion force, sir. We started with 50,000 soldiers. Now we have fewer than 20,000 still fit for combat. Vexthal's mandibles clicked together in frustration. In his 30 years of military service he had never seen anything like this. The humans fought in ways that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. They had no central command structure, no organized battle lines, no proper supply chains. Yet somehow they were winning. Tell me about this Han Sol character, Vexthal said, pointing to a section of the city where his forces had taken the heaviest casualties. His aide activated a holographic display showing the underground tunnel system beneath Busan. Red markers indicated locations where Imperial soldiers had been killed or wounded. Han Sol was a subway train driver before the invasion, the aide explained. Now he has turned the entire underground transportation system into a death trap. Our soldiers go down into the tunnels and most of them never come back up. The display showed a maze of passages, maintenance shafts, and abandoned stations. Every intersection was marked with explosive devices. Every corridor had hidden sniper positions. Every platform had been turned into a killing ground. He knows every tunnel, every pipe, every electrical wire in the system, the aide continued. When our troops enter one station, he attacks them from 3 different directions using passages they did not even know existed. Vexthul studied the tactical information with growing respect for his human enemy. Han Solo had taken knowledge from his civilian job and turned it into a devastating military advantage. No military academy in the galaxy taught this kind of improvised warfare. What about the prisoner we captured yesterday? Vexthul asked. The female called young Mira. She is in detention cell 7, sir. But I must warn you, she has been unusual. Vexthul made his way to the detention center, a heavily guarded building in the center of the Imperial base. Young Mira sat in a small cell, her hands bound, her clothes torn from the battle where she was captured. But despite her injuries and situation, she looked calm, almost peaceful. You are young Mira, Vexthul said through the translation device. Our intelligence reports say you were coordinating resistance activities across this entire continent. Young Mira looked up at him and smiled. It was not the desperate smile of someone trying to avoid punishment. It was the satisfied smile of someone who had accomplished something important. Yes, she said simply. I was a radio engineer before your invasion. I knew how to build communication equipment from spare parts. How did you coordinate so many different groups without being detected? Vexthul asked. Our sensors should have found your transmission sources. Young Mira's smile grew wider. We used your own communication networks against you. Every time you sent a message to your commanders, we listened. Every time you moved troops, we knew about it before your soldiers did. Vexthul felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. That is impossible. Our encryption systems are unbreakable. Maybe for other species, young Mira replied. But humans have been breaking codes and stealing secrets from each other for thousands of years. Your encryption was actually quite simple once we understood the pattern. The commander stared at the human prisoner in shock. She had turned the Empire's own technology against them, using skills learned from human conflicts that had nothing to do with space warfare. Why do you smile? Vexthul finally asked. Your world is being destroyed. Your people are dying. You are our prisoner. Young Mira leaned back against the wall of her cell, her smile never fading. Because while you have been talking to me for the past 30 minutes, my people have been watching your patrol routes. Your supply convoy left the base 28 minutes ago. It should be reaching the ambush point right about now. Before Vexthul could respond, explosions echoed across the Imperial base. Alarms began blaring as reports flooded in about another destroyed convoy. Even as a prisoner, young Mira had somehow continued to coordinate attacks against his forces. On the other side of the planet, in what remained of the city of Inshan, Oh Sung was leading his small group of fighters through the bombed ruins of a shopping district. His team consisted of people who had been ordinary civilians just 10 months ago. There was Kim Na, who had taught elementary school children. There was Park Jun, who had owned a small restaurant. There was Lee Su, who had been a university student studying literature. None of them had military training. None of them had ever fired a weapon before the invasion. But 10 months of constant warfare had taught them skills that no army manual could provide. Remember, Oh Sung whispered to his group as they prepared their next ambush, the aliens expect us to fight like soldiers. They expect organized formations, clear battle lines, and logical tactics. He pointed to the improvised explosive devices they had built from household chemicals and electronic components salvaged from destroyed buildings. Instead, we fight like humans. We use everything around us as a weapon. We turn their expectations against them. Every building becomes a fortress. Every street becomes a battlefield. Every one of us becomes an army. The group moved silently through the rubble, carrying weapons made from kitchen knives, garden tools, and construction equipment. They had learned to move without making sound, to strike without warning, and to disappear before the enemy could respond. The Empire thinks we are just animals fighting for survival, Oh Sung continued as they took positions around a street intersection where Imperial patrols regularly passed. They do not understand that we choose to fight. Every human who dies fighting teaches 10 others why we can never surrender. The Imperial flag hung limply from a twisted metal pole in the center of what had once been Seoul. Admiral Thakres stood beneath it, staring at the symbol of his supposed victory. Around him stretched endless fields of rubble and smoking ruins where a great city had once thrived. His magnificent fleet of 200 warships had been reduced to 74 vessels still capable of flight. The rest floated in space as broken hulks or had crashed onto Earth's surface during the long months of fighting. Even worse, many of his surviving ships were so damaged that they could barely maintain orbit. Admiral, his communications officer called out nervously, we have another report from the patrol in Sector 7. Thakres turned away from the flag and walked back toward his temporary command post. The building had once been a human school, but Imperial engineers had converted it into a military headquarters. Blast shields covered the windows and automated defense turrets sat on the roof, constantly scanning for threats. "What is it this time?" the admiral asked wearily. "Another improvised explosive device, sir. 3 soldiers killed, 2 more wounded." The device was hidden inside what appeared to be a child's toy. Thakres closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. This was the 5th attack today and it was not even noon yet. The official surrender had been signed 3 weeks ago, but the humans seemed to have forgotten to actually surrender. "Have we identified who is responsible?" he asked. "No, sir. The explosion was triggered remotely, and the perpetrators disappeared before our response teams arrived. Just like all the others." The admiral walked to a large window that looked out over the destroyed city. In the distance he could see Imperial soldiers moving carefully through the streets, constantly watching for threats. They no longer walked in confident formations like conquerors. Instead they moved like nervous prey animals, jumping at every sound and shadow. Commander Vexthal emerged from the ruins of what had once been Tegu's central business district. His armor was scorched and dented from yet another explosive device that had detonated near his patrol. The humans had shown remarkable creativity in hiding their traps. This one had been concealed inside an abandoned food cart. He stopped at a pile of rubble that marked the location where a human named Quan Jay had made his final stand 2 weeks earlier. Quan Jay had been a simple office worker before the invasion, but he had held this intersection for 6 hours against an entire Imperial battalion before finally being overwhelmed. Even after his death, Quan Jay continued to cause problems. The humans had somehow turned his final battle into a symbol of resistance. Imperial intelligence reported that his name was being carved into walls throughout the city, along with messages of defiance in the human language. Vexthal's communication device crackled to life. "Commander, we have urgent reports from Imperial Command." "Go ahead," Vexthal replied, though he suspected the news would not be good. "Sir, we are receiving troubling reports from across the Empire. There are riots on the Zephyrian slave colonies. The mining operations on Kepler 442b have gone completely silent. Even some of the inner ring worlds are reporting unusual levels of civil unrest." Vexthal felt his stomach drop. The inner ring worlds were the Empire's most loyal and peaceful territories. They had been under Imperial rule for thousands of years without any significant problems. "What kind of unrest?" he asked. "The reports describe tactics very similar to what we have encountered here on Earth, sir. Improvised explosives, coordinated ambushes, infrastructure sabotage. It appears that news of the human resistance has spread throughout Imperial space." Back on his flagship, Admiral Thakres was reviewing similar reports from his intelligence officers. The pattern was becoming clear and terrifying. Everywhere the Empire had broadcast news of their victory over Earth, subject populations had begun copying human tactics. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, slaves had learned to turn their drilling equipment into weapons. They had collapsed entire mining shafts, trapping Imperial overseers underground. The planet's mineral production had dropped to zero almost overnight. The Zephyrian colonies, which had been peacefully supplying agricultural products for decades, suddenly erupted in coordinated uprisings. The rebels there had learned to poison food supplies and destroy transportation networks, exactly like the humans had done. Even more disturbing were reports from the inner ring. These were wealthy, comfortable worlds where the inhabitants had seemed perfectly content with Imperial rule. But now they were organizing resistance cells and planning sabotage operations. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "our analysts believe that detailed information about human tactics is being transmitted throughout the Empire. Someone is teaching these populations how to fight like the humans fought." Thakres stared at the star charts showing dozens of worlds marked with red warning symbols. Each red mark represented a world experiencing unrest or rebellion. There were too many to count. In the bombed ruins of Gwangju, Commander Vexthal was conducting another patrol when he heard voices coming from beneath a collapsed building. Following the sound, he found a hidden entrance to what appeared to be a basement shelter. Inside he discovered something that chilled him to his core. A group of human children, none older than 12 years, sat in a circle around an elderly woman. The woman was teaching them how to build explosive devices using materials scavenged from the destroyed city above. The children listened carefully as she explained how to mix household chemicals to create powerful bombs. They practiced connecting wires and timing devices with the concentration of students learning mathematics or literature. The elderly woman looked up when Vexthal entered. She showed no fear, only a calm determination that reminded him of every human he had encountered during the long months of fighting. "You are Li Hai," Vexthul said, recognizing her from intelligence reports. "You were a retired teacher before the invasion." "I am still a teacher," Li Hai replied firmly. "I am just teaching different subjects now." Vexthul looked around at the children, who continued working on their explosive devices despite his presence. "Why do you teach them this? The war is over. Your world has surrendered." Li Hai smiled the same defiant smile he had seen on every human face. "The war is not over, Commander. It is just beginning. And these children will grow up knowing how to fight." She gestured to her young students. "Someday they will be free. And when that day comes, they will need to know how to keep others free too." Vexthul realized with growing horror that the Empire had not conquered Earth. They had created something far more dangerous. They had proven that the mighty Galactic Empire could bleed, and they had taught the galaxy exactly how to make it happen. 10 years had passed since the war on Earth ended, but Commander Vexthul could not forget the screaming. He lived now on Haven Prime, a quiet farming world far from the busy centers of the Galactic Empire. His small house sat in the middle of green fields where nothing more dangerous than crop insects ever disturbed the peace. Or so he had thought. Every morning, Vexthul tended to his vegetables and fruit trees. The simple work helped him forget the nightmares that still came to him in sleep. But every evening, his communication system brought him news that made his blood run cold. Today's reports were worse than usual. Emergency transmission from Proxima Centauri B, his communication device announced in its mechanical voice. Complete loss of contact with mining facilities. Estimated casualties in the thousands. Vexthul set down his farming tools and walked slowly to his communication console. He had been receiving reports like this for months now, but each one still shocked him. The pattern was always the same. "Play the full report," he commanded. The voice of an Imperial administrator filled his small kitchen. The uprising began 3 days ago when the mining slaves somehow obtained explosive charges. They used the mining equipment to collapse the main shafts, trapping our overseers underground. The rebels appear to be led by someone called Ko Jin, a human who was supposedly transferred here after the Earth campaign. Vexthul's mandibles clicked nervously. Ko Jin had been one of the human prisoners captured during the final days of the Earth invasion. The records showed he had been sent to Proxima Centauri B to work in the deep mines as punishment for his continued resistance. "The rebels have turned the entire mining complex into a fortress," the report continued. "They know every tunnel, every passage, every weak point in the structure. Our forces cannot advance without suffering massive casualties. It is exactly like the tactics used by humans during the Earth campaign." The transmission ended with a burst of static. Vexthul stared at the communication device for a long moment before requesting the next report. "Emergency bulletin from the agricultural world of Harvest," the device announced. "Food production has ceased completely. Supply convoys are being systematically destroyed by coordinated attacks." This report came from a different Imperial administrator, but the story was disturbingly familiar. "The attacks began 2 months ago," the voice explained. "Someone has been teaching the indentured workers how to create poisons from agricultural chemicals. They have contaminated our food stores and destroyed our transportation networks." The rebel leader identifies herself as Shin Era, another human survivor from the Earth campaign. Vexthul remembered Shin Era well. She had been a chemistry teacher before the invasion, captured while trying to organize civilian resistance in her city. Like Ko Jin, she had been sent to a labor camp as punishment for refusing to cooperate with Imperial authorities. "The workers have learned to communicate using the planet's own agricultural communication network," the report went on. "They coordinate their attacks with precision that our military analysts find impossible to counter. Every time we send troops to one location, they strike somewhere else. It is as if they can read our minds." More reports followed. Titan 7 had fallen to a slave rebellion led by another human survivor. The outer territories were experiencing coordinated uprisings across a dozen worlds. New Babylon's government had been overthrown by rebels who fought using tactics that Imperial forces found impossible to predict or counter. Each rebellion was led by a human survivor from the Earth campaign. Each group of rebels fought using the same improvised tactics that had made Earth's conquest so costly. And each successful uprising inspired more rebellions on nearby worlds. Vexthul walked outside into his garden as the sun began to set. The peaceful fields around his house looked the same as always, but he could no longer find comfort in their quiet beauty. The galaxy was burning, and somehow it was all connected to the war he had fought on Earth 10 years ago. His communication device crackled to life once more. This time the voice was one he recognized immediately. "Vexthul," said Admiral Thokres, "I know you have retired, but I need to speak with someone who will understand what is happening." The Admiral's voice sounded hollow and defeated. This was not the confident military leader who had commanded the invasion of Earth. "The Empire is crumbling," Thokres continued. "We are receiving reports of rebellion from every sector. Hundreds of worlds are in open revolt. Our military forces are stretched beyond their breaking point." Vexthul activated his communication system's response mode. "Admiral, how is this possible? The human survivors were scattered across the galaxy in small numbers. They should not have been able to organize anything on this scale." "That is exactly the problem," Thokres replied. "They did not need to organize anything. They just needed to teach. Every human survivor became a teacher, showing oppressed populations how to fight using the same tactics that nearly defeated us on Earth." The Admiral paused, and Vexthul could hear the sound of explosions in the background. "We thought we had won a great victory by conquering Earth," Thokres said. "But we made a terrible mistake. We destroyed one world and created 1,000 rebels. The humans did not just fight us. They taught the entire galaxy how to fight." Vexthul listened in silence as his former commander described the collapse of an empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. "Every species we have oppressed for centuries is now using human tactics against us," Thokres continued. "They have learned to turn our own technology against us. They have learned to fight from the shadows. Most importantly, they have learned that empires built on fear can be defeated if enough people refuse to be afraid." The transmission ended with a burst of static and the sound of distant weapons fire. That night, Vexthul sat at his desk and began writing what he knew would be his final military report. His hands shook slightly as he recorded his thoughts for future historians to find. "We came to Earth seeking to demonstrate our power," he wrote. "We wanted to show the galaxy that resistance was futile, that the Empire could not be defeated. Instead, we gave the galaxy's oppressed peoples the most dangerous weapon imaginable: hope." He paused in his writing and looked out the window at his peaceful fields. In the distance, he could see the lights of other farms and small villages. Everything looked normal and quiet. "The humans showed them that empires built on fear could fall," he continued writing. "More importantly, they taught them exactly how to make it happen. We thought we were crushing a rebellion, but we were actually starting one." As he sealed his final report, explosions echoed across the night sky. Even Haven Prime, the most peaceful world in the Empire, was no longer safe. Somewhere in those flames, Vexthul knew, would be another human survivor teaching others that freedom was worth any price.